Hi guys, welcome back to Waxing On. It's Monday, and you know Monday means jazz. Today we're looking at a guitarist that I first became aware of in the early 70s. And he was being mentioned a lot in downbeat readers polls, critics polls, and kind of piqued my curiosity. This was George Benson. And I have a George Benson album here that I just recently came in possession of that I'm going to feature today. George Benson live in LA. And we'll get back to that album in just a second. Now, first George Benson albums I remember seeing, he was recording for Creed Taylor. And this was back early 70s. Now, at that time, Creed Taylor was recording a lot of great jazz players. We've already talked about Diodato and Bob James on previously posted episodes. And they were some great, great albums. And it was kind of the format of how Creed Taylor liked to present them. There'd be some traditional songs, there'd be some ones that he would put a full orchestra and a full band with. There might be a little quartet programming as well. But the albums, they just had an excellent sound. He featured some of the best East Coast session players on these albums, and for me, I always enjoyed that. No matter who I was listening to, it was great to hear some great horn sections and the great reed sections he put together. They were certainly easily accessible for people to get exposed to jazz. And at that time, he was recording a lot of people. They had not just George Benson, Hubert Laws on flute was being recorded there. Of course, we mentioned Bob James and Diodato. We had Stanley Turrentine. Ron Carter, bass player, was recording for him. And Freddie Hubbard. My first Freddie Hubbard album was produced by Creed Taylor. So Creed Taylor producing and also had his own record label. And again, anytime I saw his name on an album, I knew it was going to be a good one. Now, first time I remember really hearing George Benson was my wife had the album Breezin', which was really his breakout album with the big hit on Broadway. But that was my first exposure, and George's sound was very traditional for a jazz guitarist. It was what I'd expect to hear in a quartet setting or a small group in a nightclub. Very different from some of the other jazz guitarists who were around at the time. I remember John Abercrombie recording with Billy Cobham, some great stuff he did. John McLaughlin, who had recorded with Mahavishnu Orchestra and Miles Davis. And George Benson, surprisingly, also recorded with Miles Davis. Now, if you're familiar with George's style at all, you would see that these are worlds apart, the Miles Davis sound and what George Benson was doing. But yeah, he recorded on an album called Miles in the Sky, Wayne Shorter song called Paraphernalia. He was a guest artist on. So he's recorded with one of my faves as well. Today's album, recorded live at the Roxy, 1977, released 78. And it's a small group with George Benson on this one. And by this time, he'd already, had quite a following. He's had a lot of albums out. And this was a great album because it's a live album, which I always enjoy. I mentioned about the Creed Taylor ones having a great sound and, a great style that Creed Taylor kind of created. But when you hear them live, you're hearing the real band. You're hearing what the musicians want you to hear. It's not about producers. And it's not about what the record label wants. It's, the artist actually playing for you. So the real deal is when I get a live album. And this one, to give you some idea who's playing on it, you may recognize some of these names. George Benson, obviously, on guitar and vocals. We've got George Dalton on piano. We've got Phil Upchurch, rhythm guitar. Ronnie Foster, keyboards. Stanley Banks, bass, and a couple of percussion players that show up on a lot of albums. And these guys, you're probably going to recognize these names for sure. They've recorded with a lot of great artists. We've got Ralph McDonald on percussion and Harvey Mason on drums. Now, let's get to the tunes. Again, live performances. Some stretching out on here because I got a couple of sides that only have 2, maybe 3 songs on it. So we're getting the band actually featured quite a bit. Side 1, we got The Greatest Love of All, Down Here on the Ground, and Ode to Kudu. Side 2, We As Love, California PM, and Lady Blue. Side 3, We All Remember Wes, tribute to Wes Montgomery, another great guitarist, Wind Song. And number 4, we've got George's big hit on Broadway, All in the Game and Weekend in LA. That's a great 4-sider, double album set. Inside we got a few photos, we got different band members here. We'll get over and get the little information about the recording. And they shot George on the back. Available? Streaming, yeah, sure. YouTube, some great performances. Sometimes the albums on there are individual songs you can find, live performances. Go to George's website, he's still out touring. I think the tour is pretty limited right at this point. He's just kind of finishing up a tour, but still out there performing. If you want to get a chance to see him live, keep tabs on his website. If you don't, here's a great way to start off your week. Kicking it off with a little George Benson. Some great guitar playing. Really easy, well, I don't want to say easy listening because that's kind of a mistake, but really accessible music and easy to get into. Great to just have on around the house. So George Benson, live in LA, or Weekend in LA, this one. Recorded live at the Roxy. Check it out. Okay, that's it for Monday. Be back Wednesday with classic rock, and Friday, it's anything goes, but it's kind of going to be a little more of the classic rock idea, so I hope you join us for that. Till then, take care, stay safe, see you on Wednesday.